Hi everyone, it's Pete here from the Paint Toolkit, and we're back with another fabulous interview. And tonight I've got with me Kieran O'Sullivan. Just going to say hello to you, Kieran.
Hi Pete, how are you?
I'm all the better for you asking me, thank you very much. And thanks very much for taking part in the 5-question interview, or the Paint Toolkit interview. Very simple questions. I've given you a bit of a preview of the things I'll be asking you, but I may add on a few sort of extra questions as we go along. I promise you it'll be a painless experience. Before we go on, do you actually want to introduce yourself, Kieran, and sort of what you do and where you are? I know where you are at the moment, but it'd be interesting to find out the viewers, or to tell the viewers actually where you are at the moment and what you're doing there.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm from Ireland, obviously, with this accent, and I qualified as a physio almost 20 years ago. And for a couple of years, I worked in private practice. And then I did a master's in Australia with the great Kieran O'Sullivan and some other great people over in Perth. And then after that, for about the next 10 years, I worked at the University in Limerick, where my work involved a mix of research, teaching, administrative stuff, and importantly, I also kept seeing patients clinically during that time as well. And now for the last 2 years, I've taken a career break from Limerick to do something different for a while. So I'm now working in Qatar in the desert at a hospital called Aspetar, where I'm setting up a spinal pain center. And I'll be here for another while getting that center up and running. And that's been an interesting experience in terms of looking at the similarities and differences of, the pain experience between Qatar and Ireland, and also obviously from a personal life experience as well.
What I really want to ask you now, Kieran, is can you get me some cheap World Cup football tickets?
I can't right now, but I'm pretty sure that if I'm still over here in 2022, something can be arranged.
Okay, because it's sort of not what you know, it's who you know. So yeah, anyway, keep that put it on a post-it note.
Yeah. And after the recent World Cup being pretty successful, it might be worth your while coming the next time.
I think so, yeah. I wasn't really looking forward to it, but I thought it was an awesome World Cup, and it was quite surprising how you see the top teams being knocked out, etc. So, and I think England played well.
True to make it exciting.
Let's make sure Ireland's there as well, right?
No, that's really stretching things at the moment.
You'll be all right. You've got was it Roy Keane was in charge with O'Neill?
Yeah, at least anyway.
There we go. Anyway, let's get on to the questions. So, question 1. What has it attracted you to work with people with persistent pain? Now, before you answer, I know that we're very tricky customers, and I think if I wanted to have a career or something like that, would I want to work with people with persistent pain? Probably, but I know that you guys find us quite tricky. So what attracted you to actually think, well, I want to start helping people with persistent pain?
Yeah. So first of all, to be honest, when I wanted to train to be a physio, persistent pain was not in the radar at all. I wanted to be a physio to work with healthy sports people and athletes, because that's the vision I had in my mind. That's what I associated with physio. And when I was in college, we saw, some older people and some sick people. But when we spoke about pain, the view of pain was still a very, I would say old-fashioned orthopedic view of pain being related to fractures of bones and sprains of ligaments and so on. And so I worked as a physio for a couple of years, and I became quite disillusioned because some of my patients got better, mostly through natural healing. Some of them didn't, and I seemed to not have any clue or any idea at all as to why this was the case. And I was probably close to leaving the profession, given the fact that I worked really well with people, and lots of the patients I worked with were lovely. But I really didn't seem to understand what was going on with people. And as much out of inspiration and desperation, I went to Curtin to do a master's with people like Kieran O'Sullivan, and that really helped me. I suppose someone like Peter is very good at showing support and compassion and helped motivate me. And I think a lot of the coaching skills I've seen him use with patients, he probably did that with us as postgraduate students, in terms of kind of showing us some things we could do better, but also kind of enabling us to do that. So then, when I came back, I now find, I know you might say, some people will say to me, when they hear that most of the patients I saw in Limerick were people with persistent pain. I would hear some people say, oh my goodness, that must be terrible and so draining. But for me, I actually prefer it once I have enough time. I think that's the big challenge, having enough time. Because I think it's easier to treat people who've been down the road because they've probably now realized at this stage that the quick fixes aren't working. I think it's actually much trickier to deal with somebody who has pain for maybe 3-6 months, where they're clearly not recovering, where there's clearly, a need for self-management, but after 3-6 months they haven't given up on the medical model and they can still be chasing, oh, maybe the second MRI scan will show something, or maybe the next injection will be the thing that turns the corner. So believe me, persistent pain is not easy, and nobody has all the answers, but it's very rewarding in my view. So I'm not going back to acute pain, no chance.
Yeah. I know, so I know we can be very draining, when I do talk to healthcare professionals, doctors, not just here in the UK, but around Europe. And when I was over in Australia earlier this year, talking with a few of the pain docs over there, they feel like some of them feel like they've had the life force being drained out of them. But I know we can be very tricky. But the thing is, I think sometimes we just get a bit mixed messages, and we're looking for that fix, etc. Hey, listen, that really leads us really on to question 2. And I'll talk about fixing and stuff like that, because I was very much, looking for that quick fix. And then question 2 is, what do you say to patients you see who are looking for that quick fix? Because, it's modern medicine, there's cures for this and cures for that. Hey, what about pain? There must be a cure for that. Yeah. And I know, me personally, I was a massive doctor shopper, therapy shopper. Anybody with historyology after their name, hey, I went to see him, And I was looking for that fix as well. So I learned that I was lucky enough to bump into a pain management program, which gave me the tools and skills and confidence to manage my pain myself. But what do you say to people that come along and say, hey, Kieran, give me can you fix me up and send me on my way?
Yeah. So, look, that's really common. And again, don't in any way judge yourself in that regard. I had lots of back pain for a considerable period of time. I managed it terribly. It had a big impact on my sporting career, my quality of life, and, my general form. And I wanted the quick fixes as anybody else. And I guess if somebody wants attends, for therapy, it is important to know what they want. Just in terms of if they do want a quick fix, they think that they need an injection or a manipulation, asking them to understand why and have they had past experiences with it and so on. Again, when people have had pain for long enough, they've usually tried it all. So it's not necessarily, from my point of view, banning people or kind of telling them they're a naughty person if they still think they need some kind of passive treatment, but just trying to be honest about what the likely outcome is. So, for example, if I saw patients this week who wanted various forms of massage, manipulation, and so on, and I can offer them those things and I'll tell them that, but equally my hands are not likely to be any better than the last 10 people who have tried it, And so I'm willing to meet them halfway, but equally just saying, I'm not dismissing your suggestion because, the patient should be informed and involved in the decision. And sometimes we might have to win them over a little bit. But a big part of saying, look, this is a good option, and we've tried it before, and we can probably predict what will happen. It might help in the short term, and we'll be back here again. And if that's what they choose, that's fine. And then, but just letting them be aware that there is another option out there, and it's not crazy, and it's not dangerous, and in fact, it might involve giving them more control and more kind of autonomy and less dependence on people like me. Because I think for a lot of people, if they think their problem is, that their pelvis is out of alignment, well, they will expect a treatment to realign their pelvis. So even when people seek things that seem illogical, it's perfectly logical based on their own understanding of what's going on with their body.
When I've talked to I listened to healthcare professionals before, they say that most people's pelvises are out of alignment. One leg's longer than the other, and it's very unusual to have people with straight pelvises or legs the same length.
Yeah, we come in all kinds of shapes and sizes, and even when things are out of alignment, it doesn't necessarily cause pain. If I'll really zoom in for effect, I've broken my nose 3 times, and even though my wife is very disappointed by my appearance nowadays, I don't have any pain despite having a malaligned, triple fractured nose. So we can have terrible kind of deformities. We want to use that word, and especially if you're in acute pain, the pain can cause people to move and shift and hold themselves in different ways. And rather than saying patients are difficult, people like me unfortunately have contributed to the problem by, instead of observing and saying you're very sore, you're not able to move normally, we've started to aid that catastrophizing by describing in shocking terms, oh my goodness, look at the state of you, and the terrible shape, feet, hip, knee, whatever you want.
I had that. I remember a doctor saying to me years back in the day, your spine, Pete, Mr. Moore, your spine is like a digestive biscuit.
Delicious, isn't it?
Yeah, crumbling. It was like crumbling spine. Your spine is like a digestive biscuit. I thought, crap, I thought, holy crap, mate, so I was walking around holding on to things. I better be careful. I grew outwards, I didn't, that was back in the 90s, and I think they've pretty much changed now, but at the time, it scared the crap out of me,
And look, I'd like to pretend that I haven't said some really stupid things to people over the time and probably affected them in a way I didn't intend, but I have. And a lot of it is out of kind of well-intended, I'm going to try and, explain to people what's going on, but we throw in these words that don't mean anything and just scare people. So people like me and lots of people like me have or continue to use words that don't even appear on MRI scans. So MRI scans can have lots of complicated aerial language, but I've never seen an MRI report, the bones are rubbing off each other, and yet that's the description that GPs and physios and surgeons will use about MRI scans. So we have this almost desire, is it a kind of a desire that we never got to practice our higher level English or A-level English kind of grades, that we have to come up with more flowery, expressive ways of describing these things. Instead of saying, you are sore, you are stiff, there are things you can work on. Digestive biscuit, I'm pretty sure that didn't appear on the MRI report.
No. Listen, before we go on to the next question, the third question, I'll tell you what I love. It's one of your slides. I saw it on social media a couple of years ago. I can't remember off the top of my head the exact the word in the text. It was a green background. It's like ask your patients something. What was it?
I think it's Alan Taylor I should credit for this, that he described it as the Kieran O'Sullivan test, which was around that idea that if you have when a patient is finishing appointments with me in first aid, typically I will just check with them before they go out the door. After I think I've done a wonderful job of explaining everything with my best Irish accent, I'll just ask them, if you're going home this evening, Pete, to your daughter, son, husband, whoever, tell me how you'd explain to them what I said here today. And that was a very eye-opening experience when I started doing this. And even though, I would have written in my notes, patient education, and I would have said, written down some details on that, what I was writing down did not reflect at all what these patients were saying. And that made me over time, and again, look, I would have seen lots of other people like Peter Sullivan and other people do this technique, use this technique, and it's common enough in many ways, so I don't claim ownership of it. But it really got me to stop talking so much, start listening more, and especially use very simple language. And I don't mean that to sound paternalistic in that patients can only understand simple language, but I use the language that I would use with my wife and my friends, which is not medical or not technical in any way.
Kieran, we've never been to medical school. Someone, I can't remember, someone sent me something on Twitter yesterday, and it was like a paper, and I said, I don't understand it. I said, it's too complicated for me to understand it. Wouldn't it make a comment on it? I couldn't comment it because I never understand what the hell it was about,
And from my point of view, look, if I take my car to the garage, and again, I'm not saying people are necessarily like cars, but when the mechanic, when I go in, I would just want the mechanic to tell me, like, what's wrong? Is it serious? And not even what's wrong, like, is it serious? And how much will it cost? And can I drive it tomorrow? I don't need to know the specific parts. Maybe if you're into that, you can ask a follow-up.
Yeah.
But I think we should ask patients, what are you interested in? And I know we're going to come to that, and then answer those questions. I'll never forget, I had a patient one time who seemed to have a very disturbed view of their spine. they were describing it in a very catastrophic way. And nothing in their presentation or scans suggested that, it was like. And I said, why do you think that's the case? And he said, look, the doctor told me, the doctor said what was wrong with me. And I said, well, what did he say? And he said, he showed me the thing. And I was okay, so then trying to be patient and half watching the clock and also saying, oh, and what was that thing he showed you? And then the person was thinking for a while. He said, he showed me I had the thing, a vertebra. He told me I had a vertebra. And of course he had lots of them, but he told me this in a way that he was almost describing, I have a fracture, I have a tumor, it was this growth. And, of course you could say, oh, the silly patient for thinking that, but actually that patient never heard that word before and it didn't mean anything to him. And I can almost picture how I would have done this in the past. I'll take out my fancy skeleton, spend a very short amount of time throwing in words like intervertebral foramen, vertebra, disc, nerve root, sciatica, all these terms, and one or two of them might stick in a person while they're trying to figure out, is this serious? Is this me? Is there something I need to do? So we've all done that kind of thing. And I suppose increasingly I've decided we're going to simplify and make sure what has the person heard.
Tell you what, that leads us lovely on to question 3. It's not about making sure what we remembered, etc. Question 3 is, it's about us asking questions to you. About asking the right questions. So what are 2 or 3 of the best questions people with pain can ask you when they attend their appointment?
So I'd seen this question coming up and it made me think of, rather than trying to come up with my own questions, borrowing or stealing with an acknowledgement the questions posed by Louis Gifford years ago. Because he spoke about, the kind of things that people who come in with pain want to know is kind of like, what's wrong with me? How long will it take? But critically, what can I do to help myself? And what can you do to help me, if anything at all? And for a lot of people, I think that still holds true. Now, the bit about what's wrong with me, I think I'd probably rephrase as like, it's serious. Like, should I be worried about this? And for me, worried about it means like, this is going to have I need to rush to hospital, or, this is going to mean I cannot do my hobbies forever. And then after that, an expectation of how long it takes, because first, a lot of people, if they have back pain and it lasts for, say, 3 to 4 weeks, they think that that's abnormal. And they think it should be gone after a day or 2, because it often is. But actually, when you look at the data, an awful lot of people, back pain lasts. It might be diminishing, but it lasts 2 or 3 months. And instead of seeing that as, oh my goodness, something is not healing adequately, I must rush for treatment, maybe they should look at some things they could do themselves to kind of aid their recovery, but an understanding of, look, not to wait forever, but this might take some time. And in the meantime, critically, here are some things that you could look at doing yourself to help. And then we'll come back to that. And the bit around what can you do to help me, the physio doctor, that's probably should be the last thing. Because, in certain cases, there will still be some people who need some pain relief or some, some advice on exercises. I'm not particularly against having some treatments done to people, but for a very short period of time, and if the patient requests it and feels they need it, and so on. So I wouldn't claim to add much value other than what Louis had probably said already before.
Okay, so yeah.
Is that okay?
Well, no, it's fine. I'm just sitting here thinking, oh God, I wished I had someone like you back in the day. Because, when I reflect back to my early days of back pain, Kieran, I didn't get off of these messages were never never spoken to me really. And I think what aggravates me is, what disappoints me, aggravates me, is that, because I wasn't getting these sort of messages, it was very treatment focused, very medical model. That caused me, I lost 7 years of my life, that pretty, be honest, very brutal, pisses me off really, that,
It's disappointing, and look, thank you for saying that, but then if I'm perfectly honest, if I saw you back then, I would have been peddling the same well-intentioned crap, So, this has been a learning journey for me as well. And I think what you were doing in terms of being a powerful patient advocate is going to have a difference. The challenge at the moment, which we'll probably come back to, is the fact that it's still like a couple of lone voices against the enormous kind of wave of noise that comes from the medical model. But together, patients and clinicians, I think we have a much better chance if we sing from a similar hymn sheet. And that doesn't mean we have to say the exact same thing, but we have to reduce the outright contradictions that occur between professions, within professions, and so on.
Okay. Question 4. Do you think using social media like Twitter, Facebook, and other platforms, I can't think of them now, like Instagram?
Yeah, these ones that the teenagers use that we don't understand.
I'm a Twitter man. I'm mainly a Twitter guy and a Facebook. I've just got into Facebook the last few years, but
so that's probably
like and apps and stuff like. Do you think? Well, I'll tell you what. I just got involved with is working with Teesside University is looking into virtual reality. Virtual reality be useful. So I'm guessing social media, technology, and stuff like that. Like the next Monday, I'm going to be seeing Scott, my web guy, does the Pain Toolkit site, and it's going to be a brand new site, but it's going to be massively interactive. In other words, there'll be like a chat bot where you land on a page. I'll be, well, how can I help you? Now I'll be at the other end there if I'm around. Yeah. But when you land on different pages, they'll be saying to you, hey, don't forget to look at this page or that page, which can help you. So the actual website will be very, very interactive to help people find the information that may be of interest to them. So do you see things like that, social media, technology, do you think that that can be useful in the long term for pain, promoting the pain self-management message?
So I think social media, like any form of communication and media, could be anywhere from very good to very bad and somewhere in between. We'll come back to what you were just describing, which I think sounds promising. But at the moment, most of the information out there is junk. It might be well-intentioned, but a good chunk of it is driven by professional interests, like come and see me, I'm the physio, not the chiro or the osteopath. And some of it is driven by pure commercialism in terms of like, here's my new magic potion or lotion. And so there's a lot of conflicts of interest out there. However, in terms of if your question is it potentially useful? Yes, because there's a big bad world out there and a lot of people have trouble accessing good information. The challenge for us is often the people who do very kind of good, solid science on pain and maybe understand how to help people, their skills are not in the app development, software design, or even in terms of like writing materials, putting them in language that people understand. I always find it interesting when I apply for grants or write reports, they ask me to write the report and then often at the front a plain language summary, which is almost daring you. It's almost kind of telling you, because obviously when you write this, you wouldn't dream of writing it in plain language. Whereas my way of looking at it is, well, the plain language summary and the summary, they should be the same thing. I don't, unless I feel the need to show people I went to university or something, so I think I'm concerned that the commercialization of some of those things out there, but equally I think we've got to try and get the message out there. And I think that'll be apps and social media and the internet will be some part of it. Like, it's a source of frustration with a lot of clinicians that Google, when people Google pain, it doesn't bring them to the Pain Toolkit, for example, it'll bring them to a whole lot of other less evidence-based options. But those frustrations notwithstanding, there's a lot of potential there. And I think as groups like, whether that's the pain associations and actually health service bodies and health insurers, we should probably put a bit more time into that sphere. But even that, for example, when somebody enters into a search engine, pain or back pain or treatments, it's probably much more likely to be treatments and things done to them they're searching for rather than self-management. Yeah. Because self-management, we're here talking about pain self-management, but actually self-management applies to a lot of the chronic conditions from diabetes and obesity and chronic lung disease and so on. And self-management is often just a token gesture in these other areas as well.
I think the problem here, I think, Kieran, is we use the term self-management, but if you actually ask people what does self-management mean, if you go to walk up to someone in the street and say to them, are you self-managing your health? And thinking, what what the hell are you talking about? And this is a few years ago. I was at a British Pain Society meeting up in Liverpool at the annual scientific meeting. And I was having a chat about this to one of the pain docs there. I said that, like, you know, we're talking about pain management, pain self-management and stuff like that. I said, but does the normal dude in the street, do they actually understand this stuff? Yeah. And there was a guy there, one of the security guys. And I'd had a chat with him about football and whatnot. So I pretty much, you know, I knew, you know, he was all right. I said, look, I'll show you something. I said, here, mate, come over here. So I said, so if you had a back problem and I asked you to go and to self-manage it, what would you do? He said, I'll go and see the GP.
And again, it's almost like, again, we're not laughing at that man, but what we're kind of acknowledging is he didn't know that what we call self-management was on the menu.
Exactly. It's like we're in our own little cocoon, little bubble. Of, well, we know what these words are, but it's not street talk.
No, and it's not. It's again, it's a whole different ballgame. So one of the things I am going slightly off topic, but one of the things I often talk to people about is that treating back pain is particularly difficult pain for reasons related to public beliefs. So if we take something like obesity or lung cancer, for example, they're very tricky conditions to manage. But if we walked along the main street outside your house now and we asked people what kind of things are important in lung cancer, people would tell us pretty evidence-based things pretty quickly, and smoking would be right up there. And if we asked people, what do you think about like being overweight or diabetic? Notwithstanding there's a bit of drama about low carb and high and low fat and all the rest, but people would generally have a fair idea that, you know, what you eat and exercise and insulin would be important. Yet, even outside and said, you know, Pete Moore and Kieran O'Sullivan are having a Skype chat about, you know, managing, you know, persistent pain, like back pain. What do you think would be important? They would not be talking about self-management. They would be talking about not lifting and avoiding activities, not putting school bags on kids, which is just frightening kids, and sitting properly. So they'd be horrified if they saw the two of us sitting relaxed, and all this kind of stuff. So we have and again, people treating lung cancer and obesity and all that, they do not have an easy job. But at least when somebody comes in and they are a smoker and they're a lung problem, it's not the first time they've heard that might be something.
I know it's a struggle, man, but we can't give up. We got to keep going, you know. People say to me, and they must say to you as well, Kieran, don't you get fed up, you know, thinking that you're pushing against a closed door all the time. And you know, the answer is I can't give up. You know, why? It's just we're at that point where we just got to keep moving forward, and you know, like drips of water. You know, you got to keep sowing. You know, when you're growing a tomato plant, you got to keep feeding it. We've got to keep feeding this idea that, you know, people can actually look after themselves. They haven't got to keep going down the treatment-focused.
And I think we're all aware that there's the potential there. But again, there's two strands again to the benefits of self-management. One is the benefits of the self-management approach itself. I would say at least as strong as, and the avoidance of harm from the things that are often put in contrast to self-management. And those harms are not confined to just kind of pharmacy and costs and side effects and so on, but lots of different things.
Okay, last question, and then you can go on and enjoy the rest of your evening, Kieran. So, question 5, how do you see the future of pain management for both you, the healthcare professional, and also the patient? Where do you think this is all going to evolve to?
Yeah, so I could answer this in a very positive or a negative way. So I'll give you a bit of, yeah.
We'll start off with a negative and finish on a positive.
Yeah, okay, so I'll give you the negative first. I think we face massive complications if we even want to do the right thing. And this covers some of the stuff we've spoken about already. The funding models we have in lots of countries, especially if you go to privatized countries like the United States, massively support roles of the MRI scans, X-rays, and over-treatment and so on. If you go to countries which are, you know, in middle ground like Australia, if you have something like knee osteoarthritis, they'll pay for injections and knee arthroscopy more than they will for exercise and dietary advice. The funding model is a big barrier. Even if you have a patient who says, I want to do self-management and is open to it, their health insurer, the government is telling them, that's fine, you can pay for that stuff, but I'll give you the medical stuff for free. And whoops, I'm going to have to charge my butt, right? I haven't, sorry, I haven't. Sorry about that. So there's those things. Then actually, then you've got conflicts of interest related to interprofessional rivalries. You've got the physios and the chiropractors and the surgeons. That's still part of that battle as to who gets the right to do what things. Barrier in some countries, because unfortunately people are minding their territory, and I don't care when anybody tells me that's not about putting the patient first. And I suppose particularly the stuff we mentioned already, until the public know when they first get back pain that actually I'm going to go to my GP or physio because I'd like some advice, but I know that self-management is one of the first options, and actually that no treatment is an option, then we've got a problem. So we have to really bring public levels of education way up. And unfortunately, all the chronic health conditions are undermined by social inequality, poverty, unemployment, and so on. And whether we look at issues like Brexit and Trump, even in the developed world, there's lots of reasons why it's an unstable world and economy right now. So that's some pretty negative things to think about. But I guess if we want to look at it more positively, I have a lot of hope that there is room for potential, specifically around things like, I really think we need a massive view in how we view what pain is. Norton Hadler, his books have been amongst the best I've ever read. He wrote Stabbed in the Back and books like Worried Sick. And he describes pain being like, and back pain being a predicament of life. Like sadness and tiredness and constipation and diarrhea. It's not fun, but it is abnormal to never get it in your life. So, I have had back pain, I'll surely get it again, and I will get tired and sad. But getting it and it lasting a few days is not a big deal. In fact, it's perfectly normal. And we should only consider it an illness when it starts affecting, like, obviously when it affects 7 years of your life, that's totally abnormal. But if it starts to mean I can't work for a couple of weeks and it's having a bigger impact. And the reason I bring that up is that there's still a lot of messages out there that are around trying to prevent people ever getting back pain. In fact, I think at the Cloud in September or whenever that was November, I think that's what I'm going to talk about. Because preventing disease sounds like a good idea, but if you're trying to prevent somebody ever getting sad, that would be abnormal. Or preventing anybody ever getting tired. And preventing anybody getting back pain is just unrealistic and unhelpful. What we should try and do is make sure that if you get tired, you have a chance to recover, and if you maybe do some blood tests, see if you get sleep. If you get bad, is there a reason for it? And can we help you with that? And similarly, if you get back pain, are there some reasons to deal with it? Whereas this idea that we give around prevention, it's led to people thinking if they ever hurt their back, they'll never recover. And we have people going around trying to prevent kids from running around, jumping and carrying school bags. And it's a very negative message to try and give to body. So if we can fundamentally frame how we view pain, that it is not at all fun, but nothing to fear, and that you can recover from it, then we've got a step in the right direction. And I guess then if you are that patient and you get back pain and you understand, now, number one is when I get any health condition, I get a say in it. And that's my mental health, my obesity, my diabetes, my choices to go for antibiotics or not for my sore throat, that the same rules apply when I get pain, then I think that we're in a different ballpark.
I think, from my point of view, from where we were 20 years ago, or from where I was 20 years ago, to the messages that were given to me and others then, to where we are now, Kieran, I think it's pretty much Captain Kirk stuff.
Right.
Things have really moved on with what the messages were then to where we are now.
Yeah.
I'm hoping in the next 20 years there'll be obviously even more. It's like the heading I use on all my PowerPoints now is that the beginning is asking the person with pain and also asking the healthcare professional, is pain self-management your first choice or is it your last resort? And I'm hoping over the next 20 years that pain self-management will be the first choice and not the last resort.
Yeah.
And I know the problems that are abroad there from a financial perspective with insurance companies, etc. I mean, just briefly, I was speaking at the American Pain Academy last year, and I was talking in a presentation about talking to patients and all this sort of stuff. But doctors were coming up to me afterwards and saying, look, we don't get paid to talk to people. They're paid to prescribe, signpost or whatever, So I'm thinking, what the hell?
I know, and that applies, and it's terrible. And you know, like, again, I'm not trying to judge the people in these situations, but it will be hard to convince them to change their model if they're being punished for it, and that's what's essentially happening. And I've worked in countries where people will get paid the same by their government or insurer whether they see patients for 15 minutes or an hour. And I'm pretty sure you're aware that if somebody's had pain and they've been down a certain path, you can't come in and turn their life around or help them get themselves back on track in 20 minutes. It often takes, at least at the start, an extended period of time to kind of let them tell their story and let them understand, you know, what we can do to help their pain. So those conflicts of interest are hard. And look, I agree. I think where science is now is more advanced than it was, say, 20 years ago. I think where contemporary physios, at least, and I would say a lot of healthcare professionals, are what they're being taught now is definitely getting better as well. I don't think it's far enough. And I suppose a pause for concern would be that I'm reading books and papers by people even 20, 30 years ago talking about this kind of stuff. It just wasn't as mainstream. So in the intervening 20, 30 years, it's come on a bit, but not as much as it should have. The stuff people are talking about the last 5 years, most of it was known 20 years ago, but it takes time for these things to be implemented. And most of the people that we're, like, I'm including myself in this, that we're being a bit critical of in terms of the medical model and the kind of paternalistic nature of the medical model of pain management, most of it is still pretty well intentioned. There is some financial conflicts of interest for sure. Again, some of that is almost enforced by the funding models.
Kieran, I don't want to take up any more of your time. Then I'm very, very grateful for the time that you've given the interview today, and I appreciate your time. And what time is it there now at the moment in Qatar?
We're just 2 hours ahead of the UK, so it's only 7. Well, it's
plenty of time.
Very respectable time. Well, listen, first of all, thanks for the invite, Peter. I've been a big fan of your work. I think your work is streets ahead of where a lot of healthcare professionals are. And I hope you realize how much it's respected by people that would be, well thought of in the world. Our challenge is to try and make that more mainstream and more acceptable, because I think this applies to pain, obviously, with the thing we're talking about, but actually multiple other health conditions, from mental health to obesity.
You know, Kieran, that really, thanks very much for saying that. Sometimes I've been dodgy days, I'm thinking, Christ, I need some wind in my sails, I'm getting beat up here and getting brutal, but I appreciate that. Sometimes, you don't think the messages are getting over, but I appreciate you saying that.
And believe me, we all have those days, and that's why we need a few good stories now and again.
I think we all need each other, man.
Okay.
Hey, listen, I'm going to hit the stop record button in a minute, so I wish you a good evening. You just stay on the line, we'll have perhaps a 1-minute chat and make sure this starts to upload and whatnot. So thanks very much, Kieran, and have a nice evening.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks, Pete.
Ciao.